Have you ever noticed that oftentimes people use the same word but have vastly different definitions of what that word means? In an eventful drive in Uber one time, a friend of mine was having a conversation with the driver. Found out that the driver was part of a local church, and so my friend just asked, "What is the gospel?" And the person had a very different explanation. I've been so intrigued by, why is it that the centerpiece of our faith is so vastly defined? And so what I want to do in this video is do a little bit of a primer on how we define the proclamation of the gospel, the power of the gospel, and the purpose of the gospel. If you want more on each of these, there's going to be a video available that I'll take a little bit deeper of a dive. But first, let's start with, what is the gospel proclamation? Because gospel literally means good news. It's an event, it's a proclamation. So what is the definition of the gospel? We would say in one sentence, it's this: Jesus, God's promised rescuer and king, lovingly lived the life we should live, died the death we deserve, and victoriously rose again by the Spirit to redeem and restore all creation, including us. So the news that we proclaim is Jesus, that he was promised from long ago, and it was in his life, his death, his resurrection, his ascension, and the promise of his second coming that we are able to experience the life of God here and now. So life, death, resurrection, ascension, and second coming. So that's simply stated, the gospel proclaimed. But it doesn't stop there. That's just news. This news has power in our life. And what is that power? Well, Romans 1:16 says this: the gospel is the power of God for salvation for all who believe. So if it's the news about salvation or being saved, what does the gospel save us from? What power does it have in our lives? So first, when we think of the power of the gospel, it is that we have been saved from the penalty of sin. If salvation is to be saved from sin, this is the salvation of the sin that we've committed that Jesus dealt with on the cross. We have been forgiven and we have been set free. But we are also being saved from the power of sin. If we've been forgiven, but there's still sin around. It's in the systems and structures of this world. It's also in our hearts, raging against our new self or new creation. And so the gospel is the news and the power that we need to overcome the sin that is still in our lives. But it's also future. We will be saved from the presence of sin. One day, sin will be no more. Jesus will fully return, and he'll fully defeat all of his enemies, and we will walk again in this world with renewed bodies as God designed in the garden. So the power of the gospel is that we have been saved from the penalty of sin. We are being saved from the power of sin, and we will be saved from the presence of sin. And all of this radical grace that Jesus has given us, is to change all of our lives. And that's the purpose of the gospel. It's that we would join Jesus in the renewal and the restoration of all things. That our life no longer belongs to us, but we now get to see where Jesus is at work, and by his Spirit join him into seeing the kingdom come about. So as a church, we want to see everything through the lens of the gospel. We want to filter everything we see, everything we hear through how does the gospel of Jesus apply to, or what does it have to say about this? Tim Keller summarizes this way. He says, the gospel is not the first step in a stairway of truths. Rather, it is more like the hub in a wheel of truth. The gospel is not just the ABCs, but the A to Z of Christianity. The gospel is not the minimum required doctrine necessary to enter the kingdom, but the way we make progress in the kingdom. The gospel is not just your doorway, or it's not just your ticket. It's the very fuel that allows us to live out the mission of making Jesus. So how do you define the gospel? How do you see its power in your life? Not just in the past, but how does it live out in the present? We want to invite you to see all of life through the gospel.